So open your Bibles with me this morning, please, to 1 Kings chapter 19. And I want to share with you this morning about leaving the wilderness. Now, as we lay the groundwork for this morning's message, have you ever felt like you've done what you were supposed to do, felt like you've given, you've served, you've poured out your life, you worked hard? And I'm not just talking about at church, I'm talking about in life. And even though you felt like you did everything you could do, you found yourself at some point discouraged. Because sometimes we think that if we do everything right, everything will go right. And here's what I've learned. No matter how hard you endeavor to do what's right, to live right, Satan is always walking around like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. He's always on the attack. And if he's not attacking, he's always strategizing for the next attack. And it's sometimes easy when you really pour your life out and give your life away. Sometimes it is easy to get discouraged because you're like, well, how come this is happening to me? Because I love God. And so as we're looking at 1 Kings chapter 19, let me lay the groundwork because we always have those present or viewing that are not keeping up with every sermon that I teach. 1 Kings 17, this prophet named Elijah shows up on the scene. He stands before the King Ahab, the king of Israel, and he declares, God sent me here to tell you it's not going to rain again till I tell you so. Now, it's a powerful thing. Elijah boldly, courageously, full of faith, declares before the most evil king in the history of Israel, it's not going to rain again till I say so. God told me to tell you that. That's powerful. We know the story. The famine hits. Then in 1 Kings 18, verse 1, God then gives another instruction to Elijah, who they've not been able to find for 3.5 years. He's just here or there or anywhere. They can't find him. They've looked all over the world for him. And he stands again before King Ahab, the most evil king in the history of Israel, and he says, God told me to tell you, get ready for rain. I said on Wednesday night, when God says it's going to rain, get an umbrella. And no sooner does he tell the king to get ready to rain, we find him being searched for, and he stands before the king and he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get all the prophets of Baal and all the prophets of Asherah pole, all these pagan activities, and I want you to bring them here. There were 850 of these prophets. And he says, I want y'all to build an altar and call down upon your God to call down fire. And the God that answers by fire, he is God. Well, they hoop and holler all day long. Nothing happens. Elijah ultimately rebuilds the altar to God. And he calls down fire from heaven. And supernaturally, the altar is completely consumed by the fire of God. Based on that, we find ourselves in 1 Kings 19, and he's standing in chapter 19, verse 1. Elijah has raced home ahead of the chariots of fire. The fire has fallen, it's now pouring rain, and Elijah is standing before King Ahab. And he raced before Ahab's chariot and beat him to Jezreel. He's standing there as Ahab recounts exactly what took place, telling his lovely wife Jezebel. And it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, without how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not your life as the life of one of those by tomorrow about this same time. So what has happened is Elijah has called down the rain. He has raced before the royal chariots. He beats Ahab to town. He's standing there as Ahab, the most evil king in Israel, recants to his wife Jezebel that all 850 prophets have been slaughtered, that God has poured out fire, God is now pouring out rain, and the response is probably shocking to Elijah. And when he saw what Jezebel said, he arose and ran for his life. The King James says he went for his life. Other translations said he ran for his life, came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. He gets to Beersheba, running for his life, leaves his servant, and then goes another day's journey into the wilderness alone. I don't know if you've ever felt truly alone. Like nobody cares. You've done everything you know to do. Everything you did in obedience to God. You tried to be a good person. You tried to do the right thing. You gave of yourself, your resources, your life. You poured yourself out. And instead of somebody being appreciative or even acknowledging that you serve God or whatever, instead they are cynical, critical, and condemning, filled with hate, call you terrible names. It's easy to get discouraged. Elijah now finds himself a day's journey into the wilderness alone. Verse number 4, it says, he himself went a day's journey in the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree or a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he could die. He said, it's enough. Enough's enough. He said, Lord, take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors, my fathers. Man, this guy's discouraged. Now what happened? Here he stands in chapter 17. It ain't going to rain till God says so. Chapter 18. It's going to rain. God send a fire. God sends fire. And then a cloud rising up out of the ocean like a man's hand, and a great outpouring. What happened? Where was the courage? He's alone, despondent, discouraged, depressed. He said, enough's enough. Lord, just take my life. You know what's really amusing about that? Not much, but you know what's really amusing about that? He's one of very few people to ever live who never died. God sent the chariot and caught him up into glory, and his mantle fell to Elisha. Have you ever prayed a prayer and you're thankful God didn't answer it? How many of you are glad God gives you the promise He'll satisfy your needs? He never said, I'll give you everything you want. Let me give you an example. Israel wanted a king so they could be like all the other countries. God said, I'm warning you. I'm warning you. I had a couple of jokes I was going to say right there, but I'm not going to because we're voting on Tuesday, taking our country back. I'm warning you, you don't really want a king. We want to be like everybody else. Okay, you want a king? Let me tell you what he's going to do. He's going to take advantage of you. He's going to enslave you. He's going to tax you. He's going to abuse you. But if that's what you want, so he gave them what they wanted. As an example to us. Thank God he didn't answer Elijah's desire. Lord, I've had enough. Why don't you just kill me? God said, no, I'm getting ready to take you up here. So when you're discouraged and despondent, don't give up. Point number 1, when you've done everything you were supposed to do and felt hopeless, don't give up and don't give in. Help is on the way. I said that with enthusiasm. Don't give up when you're discouraged, because when you're discouraged and depressed and despondent, sometimes your brain gets confused with reality and with facts. Don't give up. Help's on the way. Elijah here, a day's journey all alone, running from Jezebel. He was willing to stand before the king. He was willing to stand before the 850 prophets of Baal and Asherah. But one woman, And he's like, he's out of here. I posted this week. Kids' assignment was, who's your hero? Dad. Is your hero afraid of anyone? Mom. Yeah. Well, that's kind of Jezebel and Elijah. He was bold before all the prophets. He was bold before the king. But one angry woman, he's like, I'm out of here, boy. And as he lay and slept under the broom tree, behold, help came. An angel of the Lord touched him and said, arise and eat. And Elijah looked, and behold, there was a cake baking on the coals and a cruse of water by his head. And he ate and drank, and then he laid down again. Have you ever been so discouraged that you just didn't even want to get out of bed? Didn't even want to leave the house? Now, I'm not asking you to prophesy, but have you ever truly been discouraged? Nobody cares. Nobody notices me. I'm insignificant. No matter what I do, it seems like people hate me anyway. I give and I give and I give, and I never get my tools back. You ever feel that way? You just feel like no matter what you do, it's just not enough, that you're always being taken advantage of? Poor old Elijah. Discouraged. This great man of God. Folks, what I love about the Scripture is it's so transparent. It actually shows us the humanity of Elijah, this great man of God. Sometimes we think, well, pastor never has a problem. No, I got thousands of them. Church members. With problems. Paul said, I go through all these trials and situations, difficulties and shipwrecks and beatings and abandonments and all this other stuff. And on top of that, I have to care of the church. It's easy sometimes to get disconnected from your courage. That's called discouragement. It's easy sometimes to be so busy in giving your life away and not feeling like anybody cares or appreciates it or acknowledges it. You just work to give your best, and it seems like you're always under attack. That's kind of, I think, how Elijah felt. So much so, he got up, an angel of God cooks him some food, and he just eats and he goes right back to sleep. So the angel wakes him again and says, arise, get up, and touched him. Because the journey is too great for you. God's going to send you somewhere. And he arose and he ate and he drank and went on the strength of that meat for 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mountain of God, better known as Mount Sinai. So here he's poured his life out. He's depressed. He's isolated. And the angel says, hey, get up. There are times we need to rest. See, we used to have a country where on Sunday everything shut down. No one worked except those who had to, law enforcement, medical people. Stores were closed. Sometimes we do need to pull away and get rest, but be careful when you're discouraged, don't pull away. When you're discouraged, when you're despondent, when you're borderline or in the midst of the depression or even oppression, and your brain says nobody cares, nobody knows, just stay away, they won't care. Get up and get involved. Don't allow the devil to isolate you. Hi, I'm Perry Black right here at Second Chance Youth Ranch TV on Victory Television Network, and I'd like to invite you personally to join us every Thursday night at 11 p.m. as we look at the need for fostering, adoption, and mentoring. What a great opportunity you have to join us every Thursday night at 11 p.m. right here on Victory Television Network, and I look forward to seeing you. So God set him on a journey, a 200-mile journey, 40 days and 40 nights, which is symbolic of the failure of Israel, who then spent 40 years in the desert. So he came there to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, into a cave, and he lodged there. Wiseman says that this cave or this cleft in the rock most likely was not just any cave. It was actually the cleft in the rock where Moses was placed by God so God could walk by in His glory. Meyer says this is probably the most precious place on the planet where we know God manifested His glory. Here God's servant who has boldly stood for God, courageously, full of faith, depressed and despondent, God says, hey, come on, it ain't over. It ain't over. Don't give up. Don't quit. Come on, take this food. You're going to need this because I need you to come into the presence of God. You know what we need when we're discouraged and despondent, when we're struggling and we don't feel we're significant? We need to get into the presence of God, not away from the presence of God. We need to be around the people of God, not hiding from them. Oh, don't listen to your brain. And behold, the word of the Lord came to Elijah and said, Elijah, what are you doing here? Do you think God knew the answer to that? You think God already knew the answer? Of course He did. Elijah, what are you doing here? Point number 2 is a real simple point. When you're in the dumps, trust God to get you over the humps by revealing His presence and His purpose to you. See, I think it's sad that too many times so many people come to church with no expectation of the presence of God. We come for the performance. Perhaps we even come to serve. Perhaps we come pretending everything's fine, don't have a problem in the world. But when you're in the dumps, trust God to get you over the humps. And He'll do that by revealing His presence. What are you doing here, Elijah? He said, well, I've been very jealous for the Lord. I've been faithful. The children of Israel, they've all forsaken the covenant and thrown down your altars, Lord, and they've slain your prophets. And I'm the only one left. And they're seeking my life to take it away. And I've been faithful. Have you ever felt that way? He said, I'm the only one left. Is that true? Is he the only one left? No. You can read this passage here in chapter 19. There's actually, God says, there's 7,000 more besides you that haven't bowed their knee. It's God's way of saying, get over yourself. I'm the only one left. They seek my life. Now wait just a minute. Remember I mentioned to you that whenever you're depressed, despondent, or discouraged, disconnecting from your courage, that sometimes your brain will lie to you? They seek my life. Who is they? That would be Jezebel. Her personal pronoun, they. They're probably probably a legion of them in there. But see, what he's done is in his mind, he's the only one left and they're trying to kill me. Now wait just a minute, Hoss. Just moments ago, you were saying, God, why don't you kill me? Dude, why didn't you just stay in town? Jezebel would have helped you out. But he runs to the Lord. Lord, why don't you do it to me? It's amazing to me that when we're struggling and depressed or discouraged or in a struggle, how quickly we're willing to isolate ourselves from other people who we actually desperately need in our life, and then try to deflect everything off on the Lord and other people. You know what he really needed? Same thing every one of us need. A personal encounter with God. And that's why God has brought him out of that wilderness and sent him on this journey to the mountain of God, Mount Sinai. And he said, God said to him, "Go forth and stand upon the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by. Now, just verses ago, he's wanting God to kill him. And now God shows up after an angel touches him twice and feeds him. Now God shows up on the scene and passes by. And a great and a strong wind tore the mountains and broke into pieces the rocks. But the Lord wasn't in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice. In the original Hebrew, they say it reads, in a gentle whisper. Listen to me. When you can't find God in the noise, listen for Him in the silence. The pregnant pause. Who doesn't want to see the fire of God? Who doesn't want to experience the wind of the Holy Ghost? Who doesn't like occasionally to get a little happy feet for Jesus? Who doesn't every once in a while get a goosebump and want to go, glory to God? But so many times we mistake the demonstrativeness of the flesh responding to God's Spirit and miss the whisper of God's voice. But it was the presence of God's still small voice, not the fire, the earthquake, the wind, the rocks breaking apart, that brought him out of the cave. It was the voice of God. Jesus said, "My people, my sheep, hear my voice." Let Him speak to you. He speaks to us from His Word. He speaks to us through the oracles of God. He speaks to us in our spirits. Don't get distracted with the silence. Don't get distracted with the noise. Don't get distracted by those who have to convince us they have something that we don't have, that we desperately need, because they've got to show up and show everybody they got it, because when you got it, you don't have to flaunt it and you don't have to convince anybody. You just have to live with it. Let Him fill you with His Spirit. See, in Isaiah chapter 6, it says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and His train filled the temple. And above it stood the seraphim, the angels. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 He covered His face." In the manifest presence of God, even the angels take their wings and cover themselves in His presence. What would happen if we slowed down after we've done everything we know to do? When people attack and criticize, that we would just get in His presence and reverence Him and let Him speak to us. There in His presence, God talks to him. And He says, for the second time, "Elijah, what are you doing here?" He said, "I'm the only one left. Hello, me. They're trying to kill me." He said, "Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on your way back on the wilderness to Damascus." Let me just paraphrase that for you. "Elijah, I'm not done with you yet." See, in our world, it's easy for us to get discouraged as we're being attacked for simply being Christians, for following Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, the Creator, Sustainer of life. We're being hated. It's easy to pull back and say, "Well, I just don't know. I'm the only one. Are there no other Christians that are on fire for Jesus like me?" He said, "I'm not done with you." Point number 4 is a very simple point. Failure is not fatal. This great man of God, courageous and powerful and bold, has now run from Jezebel. But God said, I'm not done with you. It's not going to even end with you. Failure is not fatal. It is an opportunity to move forward more humbly and wiser. Learn from our failures. I don't want to shock y'all, but I haven't done everything perfect. I'm still not doing everything perfect. I'm just doing it as humbly as I can in obedience to Him in spite of the criticism, the haters, the deniers. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep on trucking for the Lord. He says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up. I want you to go anoint Hazael to become king over Syria. I want you to anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, to be king over Israel. He's going to take Ahab's place. And then I want you to anoint Elisha to take your place in ministry. You know what Elijah needed in his moment of despondence and discouragement? Number one, he needed a personal encounter with God. Raise your hand if that's you. Raise your hand if you need a personal encounter with God. Number two, you know what he needed? He needed a friend. Good gosh almighty, he needed a friend. He needed a friend. Someone that when you're down, they can lift you up. They can encourage you. When you're weak, they can come alongside and say, together we can make it. Don't tell me you don't need a friend. Jesus is a friend that sticks closer than a brother, but He also gives us one another. We need to be encouragers. We're living in a generation with all the negative and chaos that's going on. We need one another. What did he need? He needed a personal encounter with God. He needed a person to be a friend, and he needed hope. And faith is the substance of things hoped for.